Hi, I'm Adam Shepherd.
And I'm Jane McCallion.
And you're listening to the ITPro Podcast.
We're often joined by tech executives and engineers, but our guest this week is a little different. For starters, he's the youngest person we've ever had on the show, and after the pandemic led to his planned apprenticeship falling through, he decided to start his own networking business.
Starting a new career is always challenging, and when you're also building a company from the ground up, it's even more of an undertaking. Joining us to talk about why he chose to launch his own company and the challenges of founding a startup during COVID is Sam O'Rourke, founder of East Networks. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Hi there, guys. Happy to be here. I started East Networks when I was kicked off my apprenticeship, basically.
So if you could tell us a little bit, about yourself. I've mentioned that you're the youngest, but if you would care to disclose your age, your company role, how you came to set up East Networks.
So I was 17 when I started the company. I'm 18 now. I started East Networks because of a problem we had, actually. So we live in the middle of a field. We're quite fortunate to be able to live in a nice area, but living in a nice area doesn't always mean good internet. So my dad was exploring options with just getting internet into the house, and 4G internet is one of those ones that it's just good in rural areas because 4G coverage tends to cover a lot more spaces than like fiber and fixed line broadband and stuff like that. So we were installing it for our neighbours and friends and just thought, well, how many people can need this? Surely it's quite a lot. So I thought, well, I'll start a business because I've always wanted to do that. And it just went from there, really, just to help people in rural areas get faster broadband.
So, Sam, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start your own company. Talk us through your kind of apprenticeships journey.
So I started college, and after about 2 weeks, I decided it wasn't for me because school really wasn't for me either. I just found sitting down and just in a class environment wasn't for me. So I decided the apprenticeship was the smarter option, and I was trained to be a network engineer anyway, so that's what I was going to go into to be. So I was studying for a Cisco qualification. But because of COVID and the apprenticeship company not really being that great with people, they kicked me out of the apprenticeship before I'd even had the chance to sit my exams. And I basically just thought, well, why would I work for someone else again when I can just work for myself and that'll never happen again? So I did, and I started East Networks.
That's quite inspired for a teenager. I don't mean to be kind of like condescending or anything, but at the age of sort of 17, 18, and I'm sure that most of our listeners and indeed your peers are the same, the last thing upon being kicked out of anything that I think is like, do you know what? Just going to do it myself.
Yeah. I don't think you get many people my age doing it. Most people my age work at Morrison's, so...
So tell us a bit more about what East Networks does kind of as a business.
So East Networks just improves residential homes at the moment, just as residential homes broadband, whether that's Wi-Fi coverage in your house or just broadband speed in general.
Mm-hmm.
So it just helps people who are working from home to be able to stay connected. That's our thing, is keeping you connected.
Yeah. And do you just focus on rural areas, or are you also looking at urban areas? Because obviously this was inspired by a rural connectivity issue, which everyone knows is an issue close to my heart.
Yeah, so I mean, it's generally wherever the fixed line broadband is not as good as the 4G signal. The fixed line broadband isn't there because in some places, like for example, where we live, I think our guaranteed speed is about 3 meg, and we actually get about 1 meg, and the upload speed isn't even a meg. So it's basically useless for a house of 5 people. So it's anywhere really that the fixed line broadband is not an option. And that there's a good 4G or 5G signal even that we can attach ourselves to and give you fast broadband.
Obviously, COVID is what put paid to your apprenticeship, but with lots of people working from home, including in rural areas or areas with low connectivity, has that proved a bit of a boost to your business at all? And do you think that's going to carry on as you go on?
Unfortunately, I think I missed the boat for that. Because I started East Networks more towards the tail end of the whole lockdown thing, where people started to begin getting back into offices and working like not from home. So unfortunately, that is a boat that I missed. But I think if I'd have started at East Networks right at the start of COVID, I would have had a massive spike because everyone's in a big panic of working from home and they can't get Wi-Fi to their office because all their kids are at home as well, and a number of reasons. I just think I just missed that little boat, really. Yeah.
So, in terms of the process of setting the company up, were there any unexpected challenges that you had to overcome?
Oh, lots. I didn't understand any of it when I started it. I just thought, right, that'd be a good idea, and I'll learn on the way. There was a number of things which you was like, oh, I've got to pay for that and that and that. Oh, I have to do that. Oh, I have to do this, otherwise I go to prison. So,
Well, what were some of the most unexpected things that you had to deal with in terms of the kind of quote unquote official side of setting up a company?
was it like registering the company as an official company and dealing with like tax and all of those things? I found that freakishly confusing. Because I didn't understand that. Because obviously I've never had to do that before because I was like 17 at the time. So just straight in the deep end with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing I would imagine that, you know, education doesn't really give you much preparation for the process of starting a company in terms of the kind of bureaucracy and the red tape that you have to go through in terms of, you know, I wouldn't know the first thing about starting a company. You know, who do you even need to talk to? You know, what government departments do you need to talk to in order to set up a new company? I mean, I imagine Companies House probably figures into it at some point, and you probably have to talk to Revenue and Customs at some point. But, you know, in terms of the specifics, I could not tell you with a gun to my head.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just called Boris, so no, yeah. So you do it all through gov.uk and various websites like that, as it turns out. But no, school does not teach you how to do that. I mean, I can make a bird box, but it doesn't really help in this.
It does strike me as one of those things that, you know, people are encouraged to become entrepreneurs, but, you know, especially in the kind of tech space. But there is more to it than just having a great idea, as you've kind of pointed to, that there is the big back office admin-y stuff, the boring stuff that you have to go through as an individual when you're first setting up a company.
Yeah, nobody looks like Tony Stark, trust me.
So, how long did it take you to get the company officially set up?
I'd probably say the best part of 6 months, because
Oh, wow.
it was it wasn't a straightforward process. I wasn't just aiming to start it. It was sort of an idea that I talked to my dad about, and we both decided, yeah, that's quite a good idea. And then we both worked on it together. I'm fortunate my dad's worked in IT all of his life, so there's a lot of things that he can do that I had no idea how to do before.
So, your dad, for context and for anyone listening, is Peter O'Rourke, who is the former director of IT for the University of Suffolk and is also a long-time member of the ITPro panel.
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
So, how much startup capital did you need? Because obviously, that's another kind of major consideration that most people starting a company from scratch have to make. You know, how much do they have to set aside for things like operating expenses? How much do they need to even get the company afloat in the first place?
Well, with our business, there's not actually that much stuff you need to buy. I mean, there's obviously costs like website costs and buying domains and things like that. But we've probably spent maybe 500 to a grand on equipment in terms of our test equipment. But if we
Wow.
go into a customer house, we buy what they need. We don't buy it in advance because there's no need to, because we'll go to a customer. We'll go there on, say, Friday, and we'll say, look, we'll come back next Friday free of charge, and we can then order your stuff. And it just means that we don't have loads of stock just sitting there that's not earning us any money.
Yeah. And I suppose there's no such thing as one size fits all, particularly in networking. Is something I've
Not at
come
all.
to realize.
Especially in the kind of houses that we would work in generally. Like we were at a house a couple of months ago, and it took 9 decos and
Oh,
normally
wow.
houses take 3. So it's because
Mm.
it's a big old extended. It was a church originally, so it's a big old house.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, the decos had their work cut out, and it still doesn't work properly.
No, well, that's I would imagine a particular problem in rural areas where you've got a lot of old properties. You've got big, thick walls, often like
Yeah.
original stonework walls, and Wi-Fi signal just does not like going through that at all. It's one of the main reasons that mesh networking is so useful in those kinds of properties. But even then, it's not it's not foolproof.
Yeah. No, it doesn't always work, and so we have to sort of make it up as we go along.
So, speaking of making it up as you go along, how has the business kind of evolved over the time you've been running it? How have you managed things like customer growth?
Um, so if I'm going to be completely honest with you, the customer growth is nowhere near what I want it to be because, as I said, I missed
Mm,
that boat at the start of COVID. And even though I think, and many others think, that it's a very good idea, the problem is it's a new thing and it's really
mm,
difficult to sell something that people don't understand to people. And they look at it and
mm,
go, "Oh, it's going to cost me 700-800 quid," and then I don't want to spend that. Because I think most people complain about their internet but don't actually want to fix it.
yep.
So it's very difficult to grow a customer base, and that's why I'd like to move into commercial properties, because those kind of contracts are much easier to get and will allow us to do a lot more work.
Mm.
That I'm waiting on 5G to roll out a bit more, because that would help.
So, is moving into commercial properties and ultimately 5G largely where you think your business is going in the future, or have you got any other expansion ideas?
Yes, so I think that mainly commercial properties, so like office spaces, where BT and OpenReach don't want to run fiber in, but
Mm,
they've installed 5G everywhere. As we all know, 5G is incredibly quick. So
mm,
installing a few 5G antennas would easily do a whole office because of the speed you'd get.
Mm.
And if we can install those antennas, do all the server equipment, and run all of the Wi-Fi equipment out, that's where I want to be. Those commercial properties, because the problem with residential properties is that you're getting one customer that's a fairly small job. With a commercial property, you'll get one customer with a huge job because you've got so much more to do.
mm. So, Sam, you've had to partner with network operators in order to service your residential customers, right? Talk us through the process of working with mobile networks in order to offer these 4G services to your customers. I understand there was a bit of hoop jumping through and whatnot that you needed to do in order to work with the network operators themselves, right?
Yeah, so basically, we're partners with EE and a company called Data Select. EE being the supplier of the SIMs, and Data Select being the supplier of the equipment. So we
Mm,
buy our routers, cables, anything really through Data Select. And obviously, as a business, we get like VAT and things off like that. And
mm,
EE provide the SIMs, which we can then put in those routers and install in customer houses. So the relationship developed with EE because that's who we found was the best and strongest signal over the whole of the UK for all of our testing. So we partnered with them. We partnered with a guy called Simon from EE, who
mm,
then helped us get these SIMs so we can install those in customer houses. And then Simon pointed us in the direction of Data Select, who can supply us with the routers and antennas and all of that stuff.
mm,
And we buy that as we need it, not in bulk, if that makes sense.
mm. So I find this quite interesting because the contracts themselves that customers take out for these kind of 4G, backup services are with the networks themselves rather than yourself, right?
Yeah, so we sign the people up. It can be electronic or it can be a piece of paper. I prefer electronic because it's quicker.
Mm,
We can get a SIM installed in just under an hour. 'Cause that's about how long it takes to activate.
mm,
Um, So that will then go through EE. So that would be an EE contract. So it means that East Networks don't have to deal with the customer when the EE products go wrong, because our products, we don't make any products, we just supply other people's products. So I've sort of structured it in a way that once we've been to the customer's house, we take that monthly revenue, but because we're taking a smaller cut than obviously EE and Data Select, we don't have to deal with like the complaints and like the network dropping out and things like that.
So effectively, it sounds like you're operating as kind of almost a consumer managed service provider in a way.
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much what it is. The whole point is to get it as cheap as possible for the customer up front, and then where we make our money is in the contract, because it means there's the least amount of effect on the customer. Because as I mentioned previously, it's a new market, so it's very difficult to get people to spend lots of money.
Yeah.
So when you spread the money over like an 18-month contract, it doesn't seem like much money at all. And the customer gets better broadband, and we take a small little cut, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting business model, particularly as we look at how the mobile networks themselves are starting to operate. I mean, if this is kind of ringing any bells for any BT customers, BT has recently launched its own kind of unbreakable broadband offering, which is kind of slightly similar in that it's kind of wired broadband backed up with a kind of 4G failover. So it's an area that is kind of a business model rather that is getting a lot of attention and a lot of kind of investment. So it's interesting to see that you're kind of almost ahead of the curve on this one.
Yes, but the problem with us is that we're not the backup; we are the main. So
it's all right. BT sound like they're tempting fate by calling it unbreakable anyway.
it's not unbreakable. That's not how it works.
No.
Yeah, they must have some kind of small text under the adverts.
Yeah. I think anyone that's worked in networking knows there really is no such thing as an unbreakable network. So we've mentioned 5G a bit already, but as somebody who's kind of just setting up a company in this space, what is the practical state of 5G connectivity in the UK at the moment, do you think, Sam?
So, I mean, I don't think it'll ever really come to areas like where I live, because especially when they're greenbelt, you cannot install antennas every 5 meters. I mean, it's not 5 meters, I'm exaggerating slightly, but because 5G is effectively a mesh network, all of the antennas have to be incredibly close to each other. It will only work in highly populated areas. So that's why for commercial use, it's much better, because you can get lots of 5G users in a small space, which means lots of revenue from a small space. Yeah, I don't think 5G will ever get to rural areas, to be honest.
Which is interesting because, I mean, Jane, regular listeners will know that this is one of your particular hobby horses, but 5G is...
I'm very on this hobby horse.
But 5G is something that has been, repeatedly touted both by the government and by network operators themselves as something that can help solve the rural broadband and the rural connectivity issue.
I can feel my blood pressure rising already because right. It was largely the same for 4G, but part of the problem that all mobile signal seems to have in rural areas, because I'm from the southwest originally, as when I get overexcited, people can probably hear, it is like the buildings, it's the geography, it's, yes, planning issues as well. That said, some of the most remote areas that I know, both in the UK and abroad, suddenly have 4G. And so they've gone from like zero connectivity to faster than I sometimes get, living in a city now. So I'm skeptical yet hopeful at the same time that maybe something can be done. And I know some 4G towers, including the one closest to me, are being upgraded with 5G as well. So that's my feelings on the matter.
I think thinking about it, it would cost a lot of money, but you could have 5G repeaters on lampposts or on power line
That's
things.
a solution I have heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you put that through a village, I suppose that might actually give 5G to the village, and then it would allow us to install 5G to everyone.
Mm.
We just need a partner like BT who can say, "Oh, East Network to do that." That'd be brilliant.
That would be
Nudge,
amazing. So let's talk briefly about apprenticeships, because I want to touch on that, because while starting your own company is a very unusual response, I think apprenticeships are also similarly overlooked by a lot of young people as a kind of viable way to get into careers in tech in particular. What do you think about apprenticeships? I mean, obviously that was your original plan, but would you recommend that as a strategy for other young people who are looking to get into the industry?
Of course I would. I think college is really not the way to learn about things. I think you're better off in a workplace actually doing the jobs that you will be doing rather than learning about it off a screen. Because there's no replacement for actually doing something. Because there's so many things that they teach you in college which are irrelevant in working in an office where you have to deal with people who don't understand how to connect their laptop to Wi-Fi, people who can't run a printer. It doesn't. College does not teach you about people. It teaches you about like objects, and nothing is the same is the problem. So an apprenticeship, I think, not only in the IT sector, I think generally overall is a much better option. And as you said, I think they're overlooked quite heavily because people look at them and think, oh, the qualification's not as high at the end. But you're getting that work experience and you're getting paid while you're learning. I just think it's a much better idea, even though I was a bit screwed over by mine.
So, Sam, what advice would you give to young people who find themselves in a similar situation to you?
Well, I think if you can, and especially if you still live with your parents like I do, just give it a go. 'Cause that's all you can do. You've not got to pay the rent. You've not got to pay for that many things. Just give it a go. I mean, there's no harm in trying. If it doesn't work, well, at least you tried. Most people wouldn't try. So,
And it's not everyone who can say they've started their own company, even if that company didn't end up ultimately succeeding.
exactly. So, yeah, I think as long as you try, that's all that matters. Do your best, and yeah, that's what my dad's always said. As long as you do your best, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, on that rather cheery and uplifting note, that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you once again to East Network's founder Sam O'Rourke for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was lovely being on.
You can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes, and even more on our website, www.itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter at ITPro, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro Podcast wherever you find podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review. We'll be back next week with more analysis from the world of IT. But until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.